His name was Enrique Castillo Rincon, and he was an engineer, and he claimed extensive contacts with extraterrestrials, including flights in spacecraft and visits to alien bases in South America, and he was taken to one huge alien base in the Pacific Ocean, and that's another aspect we can talk about later, perhaps, the fact that, you know, they're not just aliens visiting. I'm convinced that many of them have been living here or based here for perhaps longer than we have, and that we are a genetic hybrid. Mm-hmm. And all the aliens whose encounters with people have been reported do confirm that there is a genetic link between them and us, and that we are a hybridized species. And this fellow, Enrique, he was flown to the United States. They accompanied him from, I think it was, I forget where he was at the time. I think he was in Colombia or Venezuela. And he was taken to Washington, and he was treated extremely well. He was there, I think, for about 5 days, and they paid him compensation for loss of income, and then they flew him back to Venezuela or Colombia, whichever. I can't remember all the details, but I corresponded at great length with him. He to me is completely sincere, and his story is written up in, I believe, several chapters of my book, Unearthly Disclosure. And for me, it's one of the more compelling of the contact cases.
And these are very early, obviously, in the process as well. But to me, it's always been interesting that straight away, almost from day one, it seems to be oriented around the whole idea of sexual intercourse in that sense, the hybridization program in one way or another. What do you think?
Well, it's not all. Well, my information is that it's not always by sexual intercourse by any means. That's
sure.
That's relatively rare, from what I have been told.
Yeah.
But there is, from what I have been reliably informed by people who are very knowledgeable about these matters, there is a requirement on the part of certain species of aliens for our ova and sperm, and the object of the exercise is to produce a hybrid. That's what most of them say. There may be others coming who have different purposes for abductions, but generally speaking, I would say the object of the exercise is to produce a hybridized species. Now, then comes the question, why? Well, I think there are several species involved in abductions, and that they have different agenda. But if I have been reliably informed from an insider who's very familiar with this aspect of the subject, there is a requirement to produce a hybridized species, which is a combination of, obviously, of them and us. They claim the purpose is to make us more peaceful because of our inherent violent nature.
Okay.
But from what I have been told, the true purpose is to make us more passive.
Right.
This goes way into science fiction. I'm well aware of it, and I cannot say for sure it's true, but what I have been told is, and this information is 20 years out of date, so I have no idea what's happening now. Bear that in mind.
Okay.
That the idea is to make us more passive so that they then can have more control over this planet. That is apparently the idea of some of these alien species. And that, of course, is rather disturbing for the authorities, those authorities who are aware of this. And there's no way they can come out with some statement from the president saying, hi, guys, it's time that we came out with this. There are beings here who do not all wish us well. And this is one of the main problems that I have learned, that there have for maybe millennia there has been a conflict of interest regarding this planet. And I think it makes sense. From what they say, Earth is unique in this part of the galaxy. It's obviously not unique in the universe, nor indeed in the galaxy, but in this particular part of the galaxy, it's unique, and it is of great interest in by others. It has great potential to other spacefaring races who have a vested interest in planet Earth. And here comes another problem. There are those, I like to refer to them as allies. We can talk more about that later on. Mm-hmm. There are more human types, very, very similar, sometimes identical to most human beings, who some of them have been living here for millennia. They've always been around. I think they are what are sometimes referred to as angels in the Bible. Angel. It's very interesting, the religious aspect here, and there's all sorts of writings in Sanskrit which go even further and more specifically about the gods in their spacecraft. I mean, that is a word that has been translated on several occasions in the Hindu Rig Vedas as spacecraft, the beings flying in spacecraft who were communicating with people on Earth. But there apparently is a conflict of interests regarding this planet. There are those who also have a vested interest, but have our best interests at heart, and we might regard those definitely, in my opinion, as allies. Mm-hmm. And they look after our best interests without interfering too directly, though they have done so on occasions, I'm told. And they are in conflict with these other beings who apparently would make us more passive. Now, again, this information is years out of date, Henrik, so I cannot possibly swear that this is what's going on now. I have no idea what is happening right now.
Well, there's been some various researchers, and I think yourself included in that, have alluded to the fact that the particular hybridization program seem to have been slowing down, if I can put it that way.
Yes, I agree with you absolutely on that. I just get the feeling that, first of all, that fewer abductions are being reported, but also that whatever it is, some of these species have got enough of whatever it is they require, which I suggest is ova and sperm, generally speaking, and maybe other more subtle things, more psychological information from us, which of course is more disturbing if farming our thoughts and brain patterns and things like that with a view to controlling us. I mean, that really gets into the realms of science fiction, and I don't really, that's pure speculation on my part.
Sure. But I mean, if they have been doing this since, well, let's speculate then, the 1950s approximately. We have reports coming out at that point.
Yeah.
Obviously, there is earlier ones, way back into history, but let's keep it to the 1950s for now anyway. Then we might be talking about 3, 4, maybe even 5 generations that could have been developed, if I can use that word. Or do you believe that they might, the program was a success, and they're now walking among us right now, if I put it that way, looking human in that sense?
Well, I've been told, yes, that is true, but bear in mind that there are some actual extraterrestrial human beings like us. They are almost exactly the same as us. There are certain physical differences. We can go into details about that later. I'd like to do that very much. But there are, if the story about the hybridization process is to be believed in, they are saying that they want a hybrid which is more adaptable to living on Earth, whereas they have certain difficulties. Some of these smaller, the so-called greys, I believe, is the popular expression, the ones with the bug eyes and so forth. Obviously, they can't walk around without
getting noticed,
generating a lot of notice. So it's quite possible that they are infiltrating by trying to adapt more human appearances. And there have been a few reports, but just how seriously one should take this scenario, I don't know. And again, my information on that is 20 years out of date, and I have no idea what's happening right now, except that there certainly have been many beings highly advanced technologically, and some of them spiritually, whatever way you care to think, who have our best interests at heart and who are even living here, living among us.
Well, if we look at this from the point of view of the considered agenda, can you see personally that humanity have become less aggressive, more, I guess, more pacified in one sense, Timothy?
I don't see any evidence of that at all, quite frankly.
Okay.
It might be true in some cases, but generally speaking, I think, I mean, you've only got to look at the world situation, the amount of violence that goes on in many countries around the world, the horrific things that go on.
Yeah. And again, in one sense, if this is the program that is going on, and if we take that seriously, then this obviously is very advanced warfare, colonization in that sense, and it might be, considered that the agenda in that sense actually is to turn human beings against each other, divide and conquer. In that sense, this might be old strategies that humanity themselves have used for hundreds of years as well, right?
Well, Henrik, you could well be right. You could well be right. It might serve some of them their best interests to keep us at war with each other. But as I said before, there is a conflict situation. I have been told, and I think this is still going on, definitely, and the aliens that I know more about, the more human ones, say that there is a serious conflict between them and these other species who have a vested interest for the wrong reasons in this planet, and there's a constant conflict going on. So we are sort of piggy in the middle, if you like.
Right.
This has been described for me, for example, by Rubens Vieira, a Brazilian meteorologist who I wrote about in Unearthly Disclosure, not my last book, but the one previous to that. And he gave me a lot of information, tremendous amount. Rubens Vieira is a highly respected meteorologist. He has a weather program in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. He is listed in all sorts of scientific journals. He's written articles for numerous geographic magazines. He's an explorer of the Antarctic with the United States Navy, with Brazilian Navy ships and surveys. And he's 80 years old now, but you can Google him. He's a great guy, and he had experienced his first encounter with a UFO was in Antarctica. Mm-hmm. Way back, and he subsequently had communications with extraterrestrials, and he was so incredulous about all this that he asked them to prove their existence to him. He was getting communications from them, and they said, "Okay, well, what would you like us to do?" And he was out in I forget exactly what area of Brazil it was, but he asked them to give some kind of demonstration. Mm-hmm. And so they actually made the local weather change very, very dramatically before his eyes and with witnesses present. Knowing that he was a meteorologist, that he would know whether this kind of thing was possible or not. And he was absolutely, completely convinced and astonished by this. The way he told me that. So he was firmly convinced, and he's had a lot of experience. He worked for quite a few years with the CIA in Washington in communications and things. He's a very, very, very impressive witness and a real gentleman. I have a great deal of respect for him and for what I have learned from him about some of these ETs.
So. What do you think is the next step in this process? I mean, are we, as you say there, are we completely stuck in the middle here, or